In this game, you only make it far if you're loyal. And if you grew up with your mother and your father, you spoiled.
In this game, you only make it far if you're loyal, and if you grew up with your mother and your father, you're spoiled. That Lloyd Banks line characterized what seemed to be the consensus view on fatherly presence. It was a spoil, an embarrassment of riches. And growing up, my father wasn't just present, he was active. If I had a school field trip and needed my mom or dad to sign the permission slip, they wouldn't just sign it. They'd sign up to be a chaperone and take off from work to be there. When I had basketball practice, most parents would drop their kid off and pick them up afterwards. I always had my mom and dad there supporting me from the sidelines. Not a game, we're talking about practice. But not only that, I remember at least one time when the coach couldn't make it and my dad stepped in and coached the practice. Many of my friends and relatives didn't have a father who was a consistent presence in their lives, and it's hard to see something as a necessity when it's such a rarity. Having my dad felt like a privilege, but I've learned over the years that I wasn't spoiled growing up with my mother and my father. That wasn't a luxury, it was an essential. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, people raised in a father-absent home are more likely to have behavioral problems, abuse drugs and alcohol, suffer from obesity, drop out of high school, become incarcerated, and live in poverty. And keep in mind, these statistics infer nothing about the difference that a father's quality of parenting makes. This merely shows the difference that a father's presence makes. Rapper Lord Jamar gave insightful commentary on the role that a father's presence, or lack thereof, has on their child's behavior.
You had a father in your household growing up, right?
No,
You just had your mother.
and my grandmother.
How often was your father around?
Once in a while.
Once a year?
You know, it would depend on the year.
So sometimes a year would pass where you wouldn't see your father.
Yeah.
So this is a conversation that I've been having with people. If you're raised just around women, and women are more emotional than men, do you in turn grow up to be a man who's overly emotional?
Probably. You're going to have definitely elements of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Of whoever you looked up to.
Do you feel that you're overly emotional because you didn't have your father around?
I think I used to be very emotional.
You had
Especially when I was younger.
you had to grow out of it.
Yeah. I mean, me and him in school now.
Yeah.
That we grown, but
When you're an adult, your relationship with your parents is much different than when you are still learning
Right.
how to be a man.
then that's why you got to find your father figures. So where do we find them? TV, on the street, in movies.
Who was your main father figure?
Probably the father from Good Times. Muhammad Ali, Nate Archibald, Dr. J, like those was my father figures. You just kind of look at these dudes and you just kind of be like, that's what I want to be like.
My father was more introverted than my mother. He had more of a quiet spirit. Growing up, I thought that was just a personality difference, but in retrospect, I realized he was teaching me lessons in manhood. He showed me that masculinity isn't exhibited by demonstration of emotions, but rather by control of emotions. Perhaps the clearest example of this was during one of my basketball games. I was on the bench, not getting as much playing time as I was accustomed to. The stands were only open on the side of the court across from the team benches. My parents were watching from the stands, my dad still in uniform, having come straight from work. I noticed him get up and walk across the baseline towards my team's bench. I didn't know what he was going to say or do, and as it turns out, nothing. He just sat down on the bench like if he was on the team, and that was all he needed to do. Seconds later, my coach rushed me into the game. My dad understood that emotional demonstrations aren't necessary when you understand the strength and power of a masculine presence. I love my dad, and I'll miss him. I've learned that my time with him wasn't a spoil, it was a gift.
I am not ready to be without you. A man who has not prepared his children for his own death has failed as a father. Have I ever failed you? Never.
Time with a good father is preparation for time without. I'm grateful that he didn't leave me unprepared for this time.